Harry, 6th in line to the British throne.
Royal salute!
He's a man who's seen frontline action in Afghanistan. Not once, but twice. He's a qualified Apache pilot. And he's used his experiences to help his fellow comrades suffering mentally and physically from their commitment to Queen and country.
People see him as real and someone who is relatable.
You can't help but like the guy. In one word, genuine.
In May 2018, Prince Harry tied the knot at St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle with American actress and humanitarian campaigner Meghan Markle. He fell for someone viewed as normal rather than privileged. The pair chose the opening ceremony of the 2017 Invictus Games in Toronto as their first official event together. After that, Harry ensured his fiancée was by his side at many of the events for causes he champions. Meghan appeared on stage not only with Harry, but William and Kate too, for the first ever annual Royal Foundation Forum. It was a chance for the couples to unveil their charitable vision for the future.
The perception of mental health now across this country and also in other countries has changed, without a doubt.
The impact they all made with Heads Together was tremendous, so I'm very excited.
From day one, Harry ensured his future wife had a place at the centre of the work that he's always been so passionate about. As an actress, the limelight wasn't a concern for Meghan, and she immediately started winning the crowd on her own. Prince Harry had chosen a partner who only seemed to bolster his position as Britain's most loved royal.
Prince Harry's personality is expressed on camera, is expressed wherever you meet him. His personality is expressed, whether that's frustration or joy or any other emotion. It's expressed.
Been waiting for that for ages, haven't you?
I've been longing to do it.
Yeah.
He's just as genuine in person as he comes across in the media. He's a genuinely good guy who genuinely wants to help people and do good, and use the platform that he has to affect that.
I think he has developed a very attractive characteristic and personality. He's picked an amazing person to marry. I think that Prince Harry and Meghan will be a great couple.
So how much has the military contributed to the man Prince Harry has grown into being today? His exposure to the armed forces began long before he was old enough to sign up. Here on an official visit to Hona with his mother, Princess Diana, in 1993.
The Light Dragoons is the only Germany-based armoured reconnaissance regiment at present, something which obviously delighted His Royal Highness Prince Harry, who was given the chance to experience the thrill of riding in one of their scimitars.
The royal family have a long tradition of association with the military. The Queen is not only head of the armed forces, but is also the wife and mother of individuals who've served.
From the moment a toddler toddles through Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Sandringham or Kensington Palace, there is the military. It feels military in any of those places. You see it all the time. The clock is wound up by somebody in the military. You look out from the balcony, look out from the bedroom window, and there are sentries. There isn't a single moment from when you can actually look around and guess where you are that you don't know exactly where you are. You're not far from sitting on a horse and saluting somebody. And your life is, you enter a life of scarlet and gold and bearskins.
So it wasn't surprising a career in the military seemed attractive to a young Harry.
When he went to Sandhurst, he was younger than most, because the majority of entrants to Sandhurst now, as they have been for the last 10, 20, 30 years, are graduates. So typically age 22, 23. He wasn't a graduate. He'd had a little bit of time out between school and going to Sandhurst. So he was a couple of years, 2 or 3 years younger than the rest. And when you're late teens, early 20s, actually there's a sort of certain amount of maturing. So he was exposed to a lot of things early on. It's a tough course for that year. And then, of course, he found himself commanding a troop. soldiers, some of whom are young, some of whom kicked around a bit. And that's a very interesting experience for any young officer to have, particularly if you come from a privileged background, which, let's face it, although Prince Harry's background was complicated after the sad death of his mother, but a fairly privileged background from Eton and from within the royal family. So to actually be knocking shoulders with soldiers who've come from anywhere is a really good growing up part of the process and finding out about life.
While Prince Harry can do little wrong in the public eye today, it hasn't always been that way.
He was growing up. He felt a contempt for the media, the way they followed him, the paparazzi, the way they dogged him, and the way they were out for his blood. And to some extent they were. But I remember talking to a photographer he said, I really like this guy. He said, but if he's got his shirt undone when he comes out of there, that'll make page one. And that's what I like. He may not like it, but he shouldn't have left his shirt undone. It was this sort of strange relationship.
But Harry turned things around, and his military service appears to be key to his public image rehabilitation.
We all noticed that young Prince Harry, who was often filmed falling out of nightclubs at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, that gradually lessened. Yes, I know there was the famous occasion before he deployed on the helicopter tour when he probably did a couple of things he would rather not have done. I'm not so much cross with him for that. I'm actually pretty cross with those who he was with, who actually shouldn't have let him get into that position. That was friends not being fair on him. But a bit unwise on his part as well. But that's an episode we all got through. His commanding officer, I'm quite sure, had very short, sharp words with him. But frankly, that's the last we've seen of that kind of youthful misbehaviour.
Not only was he kept on the straight and narrow, military service also helped him deal with the emotions from the death of his mother. It was something he spoke of during a candid interview with his friend and Invictus colleague Dave Henson.
Well, thank you.
Sweaty, but good.
Oh, I'm always sweaty.
Yeah, I've got plenty of issues, but most of them, none of them really relate to Afghanistan. But Afghanistan was the thing that triggered everything else, and the process of which, if you not to get too personal, but if you lose your mum at the age of 12, then you've got to deal with it. Yeah. And the idea that 20 years later still hadn't really, or whatever it was, 15, 17 years later, still hadn't dealt with it. Afghan was the moment. It was like, right, deal with it. And then sharing the stories and being amongst people who you know, when they tell you the issues that they're having, it's like, okay, yep, I've been there, done that. Yep, that seems familiar. Yep. And you go through all these lists, you're like, okay, wow. So actually we have a lot more in common than we meet the eye. And then people suddenly jump to conclusions and go, oh, it must be Afghanistan. So no, man, like so many people who suffer from depression, anxiety, alcoholism, all that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily Afghanistan. It can be from when they were young, and Afghanistan was the trigger to bring it all to light and to deal with that stuff.
To understand how a once wayward Prince Harry became the most well-regarded royal, we have to go back to 2005. This is where it all began, Sandhurst Military Academy. If Harry was hoping for time out of the limelight, he must have been sorely disappointed. Press interest in the baby-faced officer cadet was huge. It took Sandhurst by surprise. There were a number of breaches of security, including one undercover reporter getting into the grounds and building a fake bomb.
I do think it has an impact, of course, on the machinery that runs the academy, and it's going to make life very difficult in terms of all the extra security measures people are going to have to take to ensure that something like that can't happen again.
It's a bit boring. Do you think it's a good thing that it happened, or?
No. I think it's positively a bad thing in the sense that the way in which these things develop mean that this is going to be the life of the academy in all its forms, and wherever it is training, at any stage it has a royal in, and it's rather a shame that they can't get on quietly with their lives and get on with all of that, in my view.
When Prince Harry was able to keep away from the prying lenses, he did. He was amongst this group of officer cadets training in Cyprus, but he was hard to spot. Harry couldn't avoid the cameras forever, though. A few weeks later, when he passed out from Sandhurst, it was quite an occasion. The Queen, his grandmother, was there to take the salute. Officer Cadet Henry Charles Albert David Wales, commissioned as a cornet into the Blues and Royals, part of the Household Cavalry.
The Household Cavalry is delighted to be welcoming the 6 young officer cadets due to commission from Sandhurst in April, among whom is Prince Harry. And I'm particularly pleased that he will be joining the Blues and Royals. On successful completion of their training, they will move to the Household Cavalry Regiment in Windsor, which is an armoured reconnaissance regiment, and thereafter they will undertake special arm troop leader training, formation reconnaissance troop leader training in Bovington at the Royal Armour Corps Centre, before moving back to command their troops in Windsor.
With training behind him, it was time to get on with the job for real.
Eventually, it's joining the Household Cavalry and saying, now I'm a soldier, second lieutenant, now what do I do? Because now I really have to go and be a second lieutenant soldier, otherwise I'm a complete waste of time. And that's how the public will see me, as a toy soldier. And I'm not a toy soldier, it's not in his character at all.
It looked like a deployment to Iraq with his Blues and Royal Squadron was on the cards for Prince Harry. Britain had been at war in the country since the 2003 invasion, which toppled Saddam Hussein. But 2007 was proving to be a particularly violent year. Troops were being killed and brutally injured in roadside bombings and clashes with insurgents. Harry was determined to go, and he had the green light. But then,
I have decided today that Prince Harry will not deploy as a troop leader with his squadron. I've come to this final decision following a further and wide round of consultation, including a visit to Iraq by myself at the end of last week. There have been a number of specific threats, some reported, some not reported, which relate directly to Prince Harry as an individual. These threats expose not only him, but also those around him to a degree of risk that I now deem unacceptable. Unfortunately, the media speculated so incessantly and so accurately, and by about the time when we would have to take a final decision on whether to deploy him or not, they had worked out where he'd be, what his unit would be doing, what sort of vehicle he would be in, and what he'd be wearing. And at the same time, the situation in Al-Amara province in Iraq had deteriorated to the point that we no longer felt actually it was a reasonable risk to send him. And it wasn't so much the concern for his safety, but the increased risk that his presence created for those around him. So he took the decision not to send him, which was very upsetting for him. His personal reaction was one of real frustration and some anger. I think he came up with the famous line, "I haven't dragged my sorry ass through Sandhurst for a year not to be allowed to go on operations." And one totally understood that. I mean, a young man who'd been training hard at Sandhurst, had done well at Sandhurst, obviously wanted, along with his soldiers, and he was a successful and popular troop leader in the Household Cavalry, he obviously wanted to lead his soldiers on operations. So the frustration was huge, which was why I and others were determined that we would get him on operations just whenever we could.
the next deployment for Harry's regiment was to be Afghanistan. Would the then third in line to the throne be allowed to go? By 2007, British troops were leading ISAF in Helmand province in the south of the country, one of the most volatile regions. There was heavy fighting and intense tactical operations against insurgents. British lives were being lost. There was a constant stream of repatriations as the bodies of troops were brought home. Many more service personnel were suffering life-changing injuries. But General Dannett was determined to come good on his promise to Prince Harry, although it took some thinking outside the box.
Yes, this was an interesting one. Because of the speculation when we couldn't deploy him to Iraq, I thought we've got to get our heads around this and try and find a solution. So I invited all the editors of all the newspapers, television, radio channels to come to a meeting in the Ministry of Defence. And I put the proposition quite clearly to them. I need to be able to deploy Prince Harry on operations. It's only right and proper. But you speculated so accurately last time, we couldn't do it. The conversation was a bit circular for 15, 20 minutes, and then you could almost hear pennies dropping around the room when we all suddenly realised that what I needed to do was get him to deploy, and what the media needed to be able to do was to report him having deployed. So the deal that we discussed and eventually came up with and struck with the media was that we would give a pool of journalists for written and television and radio audiences access to Prince Harry during his training while he was deployed and when he got back, but nothing would be reported at all until he got back. So in that way, I could get him deployed. As far as I was concerned, getting him there was success. Keeping him there for a month so he could honestly earn his medal was complete success, and anything beyond that was a bonus. In the end, he was there for some 10 weeks and thoroughly rose to the challenge of the opportunity, and I think it was a wonderful moment, an episode in his life.
In Helmand, there was no special treatment for the Royal. Conditions were tough. Troops were operating out of basic forward operating bases, but Harry revelled in it.
You do the job. Everyone's the same. Everyone's life is as important as everybody else's. I've never felt particularly in threat, and I don't think anybody else has yet. Touch wood. But sitting here now, we're in threat. It's the same across the whole of Helmand, across the whole of Afghanistan.
For Prince Harry, this time in Afghanistan was like nothing he'd ever experienced.
To be honest with you, out here is one nice thing, not knowing what's in the paper and what rubbish people are writing. So just about in general. It's very nice to be out of touch from everything. That is probably the nicest bit about this place.
I think he's loving it. I think he loves the privacy. There's no paparazzi chasing him. He hasn't got his bodyguard team with him in the field. He's with the boys who he gets on with incredibly well.
He's one of these officers that you can talk to. He's laid back, chilled out. Once a job needs doing, he doesn't shout and scream at you. He just asks you to do it, and it makes you want to work for the man, so you get the job done.
Regardless of who's here, the Taliban are out to get us anyway. I don't believe that his presence here is going to escalate the situation or the threat to us. But it was good to have him down. I think, as you spoke to some of my guys earlier, they're extremely proud. I mean, we're serving Queen and country, and he's a living, breathing member of the royal family, stood right next to us and fighting on the front line. I mean, that makes me proud.
Harry thrived under this relative anonymity in a distant war zone. As a battlefield air controller, he spoke daily to pilots. To them, he was simply call sign Widow 67.
Got ML2 up at 30,000 feet. That's basically supposedly covert. It's so high that it shouldn't affect the pattern of life of what's going on down below. Recently, the Terry Taliban and his mates, as soon as they hear air, they go to ground. So, which makes life a little bit tricky. So having air, having something that gives us a visual feedback from way up, means that they can carry on their normal sort of pattern of life, and we can follow them.
Meanwhile, back at home, the rest of the royal family were getting their own taste of normality. No amount of money or privilege calms the anxiety felt when a loved one is away at war. But Prince Harry had their wholehearted support.
The royal family's always gone to the front line. They were in the First World War, the Battle of Jutland. Future King was at the Battle of Jutland. They've always done it. As I say, Prince Andrew was in the Falklands. And there was a question then, will he be allowed to go south of Ascension Island? And the answer was straight away, it's not a question. Of course he will be. He is a lieutenant that can fly a Sea King helicopter. That's what we need. He will go.
While Prince Harry was enjoying being just another soldier in Afghanistan, disappointment was just around the corner. 10 weeks into his tour, news of Harry's secret deployment leaked out, and he had to be flown home.
It was fantastic. It was an opportunity that I was wanting to do the whole time, and to be able to do it was, I was hugely grateful for having that opportunity. I did enjoy it a little bit more than I suppose I should, not in a sick way, but I enjoyed being out there. I suppose every element of it had something different about it.
The whole country owes Prince Harry a debt of gratitude for his service, his courage, his bravery in the most difficult of circumstances in Afghanistan. And just as 7,800 of our troops, our forces are in Afghanistan, he has served with great distinction as they have.
It would have been absolutely wonderful if he could have completed the next 3 or 4 weeks, I think it was, to have got to the end of his tour and he could have come back with his unit. But as I said just now, success was getting him there, complete success was getting him his medal after a month, and 10 weeks was a real bonus. I was in Pakistan visiting the Pakistani army at the time, and I got a message to say this story is blowing. Turned Sky News on in my hotel room and could see the story was all over the place. So there was no alternative but to say he's got to come back.
It may have been seen as a success by those in command, but for Harry, the first Royal in more than 25 years to serve in a war zone, his withdrawal was devastating.
I think he would have been very frustrated, because he'd be leaving his men behind, the men that he had committed to serving a tour with and to leading and to fighting alongside, and to then be pulled out for something out of his control, I imagine was very frustrating. I mean, it's even like that if you go on R&R in the middle of a deployment and you go home for 2 weeks, you kind of feel, although you want to go and get that break, and see your family if you've got them, you kind of feel you're leaving the guys behind, and you don't want to do that. You want to be with them and look after them and do your job together. And even getting injured, there's a sense of guilt when you're back in the UK in hospital, knowing that you've left them behind. So I imagine he felt very frustrated about what had happened.
My experience of being pulled away from your guys came from injury. Again, it was after 4 months worth of deployment instead of 6. The first thing that I felt was an incredible sense of guilt that I had left behind my team, my soldiers that I had looked after for so long. I'd left them on the ground and they were going to be coming under the care of someone else. An incredible feeling of guilt that I'd let them down through my own stupidity, which is obviously nonsense now, but that was the prevailing feeling at the time. And I can't help but imagine that for him it was exactly the same. He had been working with these guys day in, day out, living under the exact same roof in the exact same conditions day in, day out, and then was plucked because of something that was out of his control. I think his prevailing feeling would have been guilt for those he left behind.
But any self-pity must soon have turned to thoughts for others. The war in Afghanistan claimed the lives of more than 450 British troops. Nearly 300 personnel lost limbs, many hundreds more suffered psychologically. What Prince Harry witnessed on the plane on the way home was instrumental in shaping his future.
2 injured guys who came back on the plane with us who were essentially comatose throughout the whole way. One who'd lost 2 limbs, a left arm and a right leg, and another guy who was basically saved by his mate's body being in the way and took shrapnel to the neck. Both out cold throughout the whole of the flight, and those are the heroes.
Double amputee Ben McBean was one of the wounded on that flight. Prince Harry says the extent of the injuries he witnessed changed him and his attitude to military service. It was the catalyst that inspired him to create the Paralympic-style Invictus Games, but that would come 6 years later. At this point, Harry was focused on finding a way back to the front line. He turned again to the man who'd managed to get him there the first time around.
He came with his private secretary and came to have lunch with my wife and I. And we discussed it. I mean, the fact it had been a marvellous experience. But he really wanted to go back on operations. And I can remember him sitting with a gin and tonic that I'd given him, and his shoulders sort of slightly slumped. And he said, "The trouble is, I'm not like another young man." And of course, he's absolutely right. He realised that he was a prince, yet he was also a young army officer. So we discussed that day what other possibilities there might be for going back on operations. And I said I really couldn't see us being able to replicate the media blackout that we had. And I thought that the only way he could possibly get back on operations was within the anonymity of a helicopter cockpit. So what about learning to fly?
By the end of 2008, a new chapter was beginning in Prince Harry's military career. He'd taken the advice of the then head of the army, General Dannett, and started training as an Army Air Corps helicopter pilot. For the Defence Helicopter Flying School at RAF Shawbury, these were unusual times. Not only was Prince Harry training there, but Prince William too.
Lieutenant and Flight Lieutenant Wales are no trouble at all to us. I mean, they are normal students on normal courses as far as we're concerned, so there is nothing special going on for them, so they fit in and we work around.
Start with something like 4 or 5 weeks of ground school and exams. Exams never been my favourite, and I always knew that I was going to find it harder than most people, but I'm through that now, and finally got hands-on to a job that I absolutely adore. It is still hard work, but I'm better than William, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's
Have you been helping him with the exam?
Yeah, an awful lot. He needs a lot of help. It's it's the RAF way, so you have to help the army out quite a lot.
I'm really enjoying it, and as everyone knows, it is my easiest way of getting back onto the front line.
Become an Apache pilot. It was the start of his road back to Afghanistan. In September 2012, Harry, now qualified as an Apache co-pilot gunner, finally achieved his ambition of getting back to Afghanistan. But these weren't easy times. It coincided with a period in his life where he was struggling to come to terms with the death of his mother. In candid interviews since then, he's spoken of enduring 2 years of total chaos. An escape to Afghanistan away from royal engagements and the media must have appealed. But where Prince Harry goes, a press pack is always close behind. This time there was no blackout deal, but senior commanders found a solution to satisfy the press and the prince.
It wasn't in the same way, but I think equally the media had appreciated the really good coverage they got of Prince Harry when he came back after the first time, and realised that if they played ball and weren't too intrusive. Afterwards, quite difficult. I mean, Camp Bastion, where he was based and where the helicopters are based, if you haven't got authority to be there, particularly as a journalist, you're not going to be there. And if he's flying in a helicopter, you're not going to hire a civilian helicopter and fly alongside him. It just ain't going to happen. So if they wanted to get coverage, they had to play ball. And in a sense, in a more informal way, they played ball the second time as well.
This tour was different from the first in many ways. Most significantly, Harry had swapped the ground for the sky. Instead of calling in air power, Prince Harry was the air power at the controls of the Apache's deadly weapons. And instead of slumming it in a patrol base, he was now based at Camp Bastion with 662 Squadron, 3 Regiment Army Air Corps.
Essentially, we just sit inside the tent, play computer games, watch movies, and play uckers. And essentially, we'll sit there and wait for the phone to go. That was a replay of nothing to do with the goal. Yeah, that was me taking it out. I'm one of those people that, during my flying course especially, I would be fine at flying. I probably should have done a lot more reading, but I was fine at flying. And then every now and then a written test would come up. I'd be absolutely useless. And I've been like that from stage 1 of my youth. Exams were always a nightmare, but anything like kicking a ball around or playing PlayStation or flying, I generally find it a little bit easier than walking sometimes. Oh, you didn't see that coming, did you?
Prince Harry was back at the heart of the action where he felt most at ease.
Get to the aircraft as quick as possible. About 6.5, 7 minutes, I think, is the quickest we've got it going. You can't lift off until certain things are done in the aircraft, and then as soon as you've got clearance from the ops room, straight up and off you go. Every time you run to the aircraft, you get that adrenaline rush. And then once you're in the aircraft, you've got to try and slow yourself down, because otherwise if the adrenaline's pumping too much and everything's happening too quickly, then you're going to miss something. And you narrow down the checks to keep them as short and brief as possible, but all the essential ones. And as I said, it's all about getting from A to B as quickly as possible.
Harry's ambition to get back to the front line had been achieved, but it came at a cost.
It's a weird reality, being stuck in Bastion. For me, I hate it, being stuck here. I'd much rather be out the lads and in a PB. The last job was for me personally better. Obviously lots of guys like the luxury and the comforts of Bastion, but what's weird, as I said, is we're stuck in Bastion, and what's going on out there is completely separate, but as soon as we're that side of the fence, we're in the thick of it.
Part Part of Harry's dislike of Camp Bastion must have been the lack of anonymity he had so enjoyed during his first tour. That simply couldn't be matched at a base which, at its peak, was home to 40,000 troops.
For me, it's not that normal because I go into the cookhouse and everyone has a good old gulp, and that's one thing that I dislike about being here, because there's plenty of guys in there that have never met me, therefore probably look at me as being Prince Harry as opposed to Captain Wales, which is frustrating, which is probably another reason why I'd love to be out in the PBs, away from it all. But yeah, it's completely normal. It's as normal as it's going to get.
Captain Wales is just another member of the squadron and another member of our flight, and we all work together the same as we would with anyone else that comes in and out of the crew, so it's a situation no change.
He comes in, he makes a brews for the boys, he chats, he has banter, he is just a normal member of our crew.
He is, as far as I'm concerned, given no special treatment. I treat him very much as I do the rest of my officers within the squadron. He responds very well to that. And I think he enjoys being part of the squadron fabric. Certainly being out here, he is afforded some anonymity at least.
In his role as a helicopter pilot working as part of the Joint Aviation Group here in Afghanistan.
But for those not working with Prince Harry on a daily basis, his presence did cause a stir.
We all sat down in this massive tent. There's rows and rows of chairs. And an officer comes in and he does his sort of general introduction. And then he said, I'm sure some of you are aware that you're going to have a royal visitor today. Just treat him like normal. He's another officer. He's just like you guys. Just treat him like you. And then he went, but I would like you not to try and bump into him, not to try and, get next to him in the lunch queue to say you've touched a prince. And he just basically then listed all the things that we were not allowed to do. And during the presentation, at some point, Prince Harry came in and sat on the back row of the seats. And all of us were really like, we want to turn around. And we just couldn't, because we had this officer looking at us, making sure that we were all behaving.
And on some days, Prince Harry struggled to hide his frustrations.
Every single mobile phone has got a camera on it now. You can't move an inch without someone judging you, and I suppose that's just the way life goes. It's not helped by the media, but I think certain people have tried to do their best, but it's an unstoppable force.
You can't help but feel he must have been delighted to abandon this interview to scramble to launch his aircraft. War veteran, amputee and athlete Dave Henson knows Prince Harry well. In an honest interview with his friend 5 years on from his second Afghanistan tour, the Prince's irritations had dampened.
The military was the university of life, and then Afghanistan was the experience of your life. And I've never met anyone now who can't speak positively of their time in the military. Yes, of course we had bad days, but the good days far outweigh that. And we were lucky enough to have those experiences and have a really good time doing it. Everybody else our age at the time was, stuck in an office somewhere, what I was about to go, quite not the typewriter. Yeah. But do you know what I mean? It can be quite a selfish profession. Yeah. You're having fun. You're enjoying it. You want to be the very, very best, and then you come out of it, and it's like, right, now I'm a civvy, and I'm going to miss all those guys. But how can I do my bit to make a difference?
With the completion of his second tour in January 2013, Prince Harry had achieved his main military ambitions.
You get life experiences that you get nowhere else out there. As I said, for all the guys up there, some of them have been out there 2, maybe 3 times with other guys for their first tour. But it's just nice. The best thing about it is to be back and speaking to all the guys, longing to go back and see their families, their loved ones, and stuff like that. And I'll be looking forward to going back and seeing my family as well.
At the age of 28, although he hadn't yet spoken of it, Prince Harry must have known the chapter of his military service was closing. 7 years on from Prince Harry's graduation from Sandhurst Military Academy, and with 2 frontline tours under his belt, he had his sights on a new project. Having succeeded twice before in achieving his aims, it's hard to imagine he ever questioned his ability to do it again.
You know, there was many times in my early life, and also many times coming, you know, in Afghan and then coming back from Afghan, where you actually feel helpless.
Yeah.
And being in the position that I'm in, I've always thought, you know, if you can put your name to anything, and you've got a following, and you've got that belief, and you've got that credibility, let's say, then you can make anything happen for the greater good, for a wider audience of people. And once I plucked my head out of the sand post-Afghan, so yes, it had a huge life-changing moment for me as well. It was like, right, you are Prince Harry, you can do this, as long as you're not a complete tit, then you're going to be able to get that support because you've got the credibility of 10 years service, and therefore you can really make a difference.
By 2014, Harry, still with the military, was based in London. It was an opportunity to plan, organise and publicise his dream. The year before, he'd visited the Warrior Games in Colorado and was inspired by the power of sport in the process of the recovery of wounded troops.
And hopefully bringing what essentially is a fantastic idea here and bringing it to the UK. Why not?
In September the following year, the first ever Paralympic-style Invictus Games was born.
Whoever's idea it was to put me here was... yeah. Over the past 8 years, I've witnessed the whole cycle of life-changing injury, evacuating soldiers and local Afghans to hospital, flying home from Afghanistan with some of those critically injured, meeting others in hospital, coming to terms with life-changing injuries, and finally trying to keep up with 12 wounded veterans on our way to the South Pole. I can only begin to imagine how challenging the journey of recovery is, but the admiration I have for these men and women to move beyond their injuries is limitless.
"450 British military personnel lost their lives in the war in Afghanistan. Thousands of others suffered emotionally and physically. Harry was only too aware. Part of his role as an Apache pilot was escorting the medical emergency response team helicopters taking injured troops to hospital. The Invictus Games, which would help those left battle-scarred, captured Britain's imagination. Never before had our wounded warriors been given such a platform. The event went from strength to strength. And from country to country.
Please welcome Prince Harry.
And by the time the Games reached Orlando in 2016, gone were Prince Harry's onstage nerves. The warrior prince was becoming a star.
I joined the army because, for a long time, I just wanted to be one of the guys. But what I learned through serving was that the extraordinary privileges of being a prince gave me the extraordinary opportunity to help my military family.
Harry's enthusiasm was infectious and was drawing in some big-name support.
Are we having fun tonight? I, of course, want to start by thanking Prince Harry for his outstanding leadership and for bringing the Invictus Games here to Orlando. He is truly our Prince Charming, isn't he?
In 2017, it was Toronto's turn to host Invictus.
For the next week, we entrust you with the Invictus spirit. You have all come such a long way. Some of you have cheated death and come back stronger than before. Some of you have overcome emotional challenges that until very recent years would have seen you written off and ignored. And now you are here, on the world stage, flags on your chests, representing your countries again, supporting your teammates and looking up into the stands and into the eyes of your families and friends. You are all winners.
Home to Meghan Markle, it was here in Toronto the pair made their first public appearance together. If all eyes weren't on Invictus already, they were now.
To understand the situation in which the Invictus Games competitors find themselves in, understanding that is very difficult if you don't come from the same background. So whilst there may well be people who are better at event planning, people who are better at putting on sporting competitions, actually what Invictus Games does is wrap an event, a sports competition, with everything else that's important to people who have been forcibly withdrawn from the military. So by his military background, he has lent authority, value and reality to the Invictus Games by forcing people to consider the external effects of being taken out of the military. So it's not just a sporting competition, it's a sporting competition with a purpose and with design.
The Invictus Games is a game changer, but I've just seen the people that I've trained with, that I've trialled with, that I've competed with, I've just seen their lives transform completely in front of my eyes because of the power of sport and being back in that team environment and having that opportunity again to wear a uniform and represent your country, which you think when you leave the military has been taken away from you.
Prince Harry officially left the military in the middle of 2015. It was a formative chapter in his life. He matured into a man under the protective wing of his armed forces family. It afforded him more privacy than any other profession could have achieved, and his experiences led him to confront his own demons.
I think any senior person, or anyone in a leadership position, who has had an experience of a mental health issue and is prepared to talk about it is hugely encouraging for others. We're all different. Some people experience mental health issues and some don't. But he did. Undoubtedly, the trauma of his mother's death, and he's spoken about the trauma of the day of the funeral, and we've seen again most recently the pictures of himself and Prince William walking behind the coffin, and he said that no young man should be asked to do that. And I think he's right, and it wouldn't happen today. But all those things have added pressures on him. So it's no great surprise that he and his older brother, Prince William, have experienced mental health issues and have now been prepared to talk about them. And that's good, because it will encourage others to do that.
Prince Harry may no longer serve, but he will never close the book on the military. He's dedicated to veterans and their welfare. And Meghan has proven she'll be by his side all the way. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are using their status as one of the most famous couples in the world as a force for good, and military veterans look set to benefit.